Welcome to the Millennial Rant, a podcast about whatever's bothering me today. With topics ranging from politics to pop culture, there's a rant to cover everyone. For more Millennial Rant content, you can join me on the web at millennialrant.com. So I was really blessed to be able to go to Europe, but specifically to the UK and to Ireland this summer. I went on 2 school trips, one to Ireland specifically. We went to Dublin, Belfast in Northern Ireland. I think it's actually Northern Ireland. Belfast in Northern Ireland, and then we went down to Galway. And it was an amazing trip, and I will talk about that another time. But then I went from we went back to Dublin, went from Dublin to Scotland, and again, I'll talk about that later. And then from Scotland, I went down to Oxford for my second school trip. So the 2 trips were to Ireland and then to Oxford. And so in Oxford, I have actually been there before. I was there last year on pretty much the exact same trip. I mean, it was, the only thing different is the people that were there this year. Most of them weren't there last year. And none of the students who were there last year were here last year except for me. So the reason why I redid this trip is because last year I was dead sick pretty much the entire time and missed basically everything, and it was very disappointing. So this year was kind of like a revenge trip, and I was able to go back. It was really great. I very much enjoyed it, but what I was really fascinated by was the education system that they have in place in Oxford. It's called the Oxford model. And I've heard the term Oxford model before, but I didn't actually know what that was, and I didn't know how it was different. I don't know if anybody else watching this knows. I don't know as it's like super common knowledge, but it's also not like a secret. But so I was there. I was really interested in learning about the Oxford model and the way that it works. And I found that by delving more deeply into it, the American university system is flawed. Basically, that's what this comes down to. And I think anybody who went to a university to genuinely and unironically learn something can attest to the fact that the university system is very flawed. One of the main reasons why I think it's so flawed is because they've been industrialized, right? There are so many kids who want to go to these big name colleges like Harvard and Duke and Notre Dame and whatever, that there's just not any room for a quality one-on-one with the professor type of education. And so for that reason, I've actually always been a major advocate of community colleges and smaller local universities. And the reason for that being, you have those smaller class sizes, you have that more dedicated one-on-one time with the professor, and it gives you a better quality education in that it's more directly tailored to you as the student and the learner. Your professor is able to get to know you individually and able to help you if you have problems, lift you up or give you more direction or be able to provide you with specific feedback and help, which really is not possible when you have a big university and the professor is lecturing to a class of 100 plus students. When I was attending BYU, one of my graduate professors was teaching an intro course for undergrads that had 200 kids in it. And there's no way. There's absolutely no way that my professor could have had that quality one-on-one time with his students in a class that big. Not just that class, he was teaching 2 classes that were that big. 2 classes of 200 students each. It's 400 kids. That's insane. That's how can you be expected to learn anything when literally the only thing the teacher has time for is to talk at you for however many hours a week? It's insanity. So they do have TAs. The level of like TA to student is like still really high. And the TAs are also going to school themselves. They don't necessarily have the time that they can dedicate to students because they're also students. So there are, while that's better, still not it's still not perfect. It's still not great. So between the two of those, having a TA in a really large classroom versus having a smaller classroom with a single teacher, I personally gravitate towards a smaller classroom with a single teacher. There are still problems with that because a lot of times those teachers are teaching 4 classes at a time, and so if you have 4 classes of 25 students, that's still 100 kids that you're seeing every semester. So it does still eat up a lot of the professor's time. And I know this because I was a professor and I had, I only ever really took on 2 at the most other classes a semester because I was an adjunct. I wasn't a full professor. So I usually only had maybe 50 kids at a given time, but that's still a lot. And it can still be very difficult to cater and tailor to these kids. I shouldn't say cater. Cater has a completely different connotation. It's very difficult for me to tailor to these kids. And I did my best, but I could really only do anything if the kids came to me. If a student came to me and said, I'm having trouble with this, can you help me? Then yes, absolutely, I can help you. But if it's online, even if it's in person, I can't always tell if a student needs extra help unless they talk to me. And kids have been taught not to talk to their teachers when they need help. They're just supposed to figure it out for themselves, which is ridiculous. So what does this have to do with Oxford? Well, so the Oxford model, from what I understand it, I'm not an expert. I did not attend Oxford or any of the colleges in Oxford. I went there for a school trip and we walked around a lot. But I know people who have attended Oxford. They've talked to me about this, and it's a really good model because the idea is that you have these big, classes of, potentially hundreds of students and one lecturer who stands up at the front and lectures these kids. The difference is that they may have maybe 20 professors who do the lecturing in a given college, because I do have to aside here for a second and say that Oxford is a university, but there is no Oxford University. Within Oxford University, there are like 40 plus colleges. And when you apply to Oxford, you apply to a college within Oxford, and then you go there, and each college is autonomous. It's basically like a collection of community colleges, I guess, except instead of 2 years, they're 4+ years. Anyway, it's a little difficult to explain if you've never been there. So each college is autonomous. They have their own professors. They have their own courses. They have their own curriculum. They have their own culture and their own history. And so that's kind of, just to give you an overview, that's kind of what we're working with here. So when I say a college has maybe 20 professors, I'm not saying Oxford University has 20 professors. I'm saying Magdalen College within Oxford University may only have 20 professors. So take that as you will. So while a given college may only have, a small amount of full-time professors who actually give the lectures, they have maybe 400 tutors. Tutor doesn't really have a good connotation in America. Typically, if somebody says they're going to a tutor, there's the implication that they're doing so because they're remedial in some way, that they need extra help with something. And tutors, I think, are great. Genuinely, I think they are great. I think even people who are doing really well in a subject could benefit from having a tutor. But again, there's that negative connotation where people don't want to say, well, I have a tutor, because that makes it sound like they need extra help. And instead of having a tutor, they're like, well, I am a tutor. And so they go and help those people who are remedial because they're so good at what it is that they're doing. That's not what these tutors are. The tutors at Oxford colleges are more like mentors, one-on-one mentors who are expert in their subject, and they work with the students to be able to get them up to a level where they can perform as an expert in that field, or become an expert in that field, and be able to complete their examinations and all that sort of stuff, their homework, their essays, whatever it is that they're required to do. And then based off of the curriculum that the professor has set. So the professor sets a curriculum, has a syllabus, it has a book requirements, all of that stuff. And then the student goes to the lecture, they take their notes or whatever it is, and then they take all of that to the tutor, and the tutor helps them get everything up to scratch, right? They basically are the teacher on an individual level. So the best one-to-one comparison for this in America, again, would not be a tutor, but would rather be a mentor. So these students in every single subject have a specific mentor that they go to for that subject, who teaches them and encourages them and directs them in the way that they need to go to get the most out of their education. So they have a teacher, they have a mentor, and together they are able to work with the student to propel them to greater heights, as it were. This is kind of similar to the TA program that we have in America, except these tutors at Oxford aren't students. That's their job. They're paid by the school specifically to be there to mentor students one-on-one or in small individual groups. And from my understanding, these groups are usually kept very small, so anywhere from like 2 to 10 maybe. And then the groups form and they're able to help each other within the group. You got kind of like this study group thing going on. It's a really efficient, effective, and I think needs to be duplicated system. And there's so much of a go to college to get away from your family mentality in America. You go away to college to be on your own as it is. You might learn something, but mostly you join a fraternity and you drink a lot and you party it up, and you sometimes go to class and you're hopefully not hungover when you do it. And I will admit, I was never that person. Okay, I'm not the partying type. I'm not the get away from my family type. I love my family. I've said this before. I have a really fantastic family. So I never needed to get away from them, or the things that I learned from them, or the things that they raised me to be, type of thing. But college in America has become more of a culture of, I don't know, I kind of consider it like a gap year, except gap years. Kids go away to college, they party it up, they might get a degree, and then they enter into the real world type of thing. And that's not what college should be. College is a place where you should be able to go to get a genuine education, where you can actually learn and grow and develop and find out what it is that you want to do with the rest of your life. Because honestly, the biggest joke that life as we know it in our current society plays on us is that the entirety of our future hinges on the decisions that we make when we're at our most young and most stupid. And it's just, you graduate from high school at 18, theoretically. You go to 4 years of university, and you come out the other side with what? And each individual has to decide what they come out the other side with. But a lot of it is debt, and a lot of it is in 4 lost years of a constant hangover. And what's the point of that? it doesn't do anything to further society. It doesn't do anything to further individuals. It's all just one big blur mess. And for me, I love education, not necessarily school specifically or per se, but education. I love learning things. And if I don't spend the rest of my life learning and advancing and growing, then I'll have wasted my life. Because everything is learning and growing, and it doesn't all have to take place at a university. But university should be the place where you can go to learn how to become a lifelong learner, to learn how to constantly advance yourself mentally, emotionally, psychologically, developmentally, whatever, to be able to, when the time comes in the future, if you have to change things, you know how to make those changes. Right now, though, a lot of kids go to school, they get a degree in something that's largely useless, and then they go off into the world, find out that what they got a degree in was largely useless, and have to make an abrupt change in their 30s or 40s so that they'll be able to support themselves or their families or whatever the case may be. We are getting married later and later, having children later and later. So, mid 30s is about the time where people realize that the decisions that they made in their early and mid 20s aren't actually getting them anywhere. And there are always exceptions, for sure. There are totally always exceptions. I'm not saying that there aren't. But for the vast majority, college has become just something that you go and you do because that's what you do. And you come out the other side and it doesn't really matter what you did because it doesn't have an effect on your life, on the lives of those around you, on your prospects. So what this basically comes down to is that if we're going to continue to encourage children to go to college, because if you don't go to college, you don't succeed, then we also need to encourage them to learn properly. And yeah, it might take a while to catch on in the United States, but I genuinely do believe, especially these older, larger universities, can benefit exponentially from the Oxford model. They'll be able to graduate kids who are better rounded, who are better informed, who are better educated all around. And kids who go will actually be able to feel like they have a purpose when they graduate, that they've actually learned something that's applicable to life. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do my best in whatever capacity I can. And for now, that's looking for a job as a traditional professor at a traditional American university. And maybe, if I get a place, if I get settled in, I can introduce the Oxford model. It may lose me my job, but it will benefit the kids overall.